An area that's really interesting right now in terms of how we deal with just sustainable systems going forward is how are we going to deal with just coming up with innovations to properly manage climate change in our cities. And I mean innovations not just in terms of sort of making things easier and just facilitating activities in with bad temperature, but more specifically just surviving, just in terms of this summer that we've been through, this season of heat that the heat waves that have gone on in Europe, the heat waves that have gone on in in the Arab countries and in the South Asian countries. I mean, the amount of the I mean, the amount of devastation and the amount of trouble that's really wreaked havoc on a lot of their cities in terms of them just not being prepared for it, the infrastructure not being prepared for it, the people not being prepared for it. I mean, what do you wear when it's 120 degrees outside and there's no air conditioning? Um, in it's completely yeah, it's something that in my view there's going to have to be a lot of innovation around just coming up with mechanisms to manage to better manage the issue of heat related illness, heat related incidences of all types. For example, I mean, in this season, in the heat waves in a lot of countries, in the instance that's been going on for the last number of weeks or so, no one can go to bed in some cities. When people go to bed, they wake up several times a night, they can't sleep because it's so hot, and they're just unable to manage. So part of what needs to happen, and the level of, like, I think entrepreneurship and just things that people get involved in is just coming up with more innovations and more ideas for how to manage how hot it gets. So, for example, if you're going to bed, maybe I know we have water beds. Water beds are a thing that have been, I don't know if they're in other countries, but they're in the States. Water beds are kind of they're basically mattresses with water in them, and they have a cooling effect a little bit. But maybe we need stuff like that, stuff like water beds that have even more of a cooling effect, that have something in them, that and then the stuff that athletes use to cool themselves, maybe have like those sort of like cooling packs that people can wear around their around their body, like when they go to bed or when they're walking around outside. Evie, it's okay. Shit. Evie, I have to start over now. So one of the things we have to think about is dealing directly with just coming up with innovations to manage the whole issue of climate change, coming up with innovations to help people manage in heat waves, to help them survive so they don't get heat related illnesses. And we wound up with lots of hospitals in different parts of the cities in the world packed with those with heat exhaustion, and some people even dying from some of these problems. So just coming up with they don't always have to be big innovations, just the spray, the water spray, the sort of aerosol spray of water thing that they do at restaurants, and what they do in the States, and when the heat in hot places like Arizona or Texas and things like that, they have the things that just sprinkle water on the patio if it's really hot. Just having things like that, but having it go to people who are in the marketplace, having them be sprayed with something. I saw that in them doing that in India this summer. Um, so just having stuff like that to manage the heat next season. And another thing is just dealing with homes that don't have AC. So, because aircon is something that you typically just take for granted. You assume that, oh, if it's hot, then there's gonna be air conditioning. But in some places it's hot and there's no air conditioning. So how to manage that and how to deal with that. become something. And also air conditioning just contributes to the greenhouse gases. So, you know, as more people move into the middle class in different cities in the world, then everybody's going to want air conditioning because we have global warming and the summers are you know, the hot seasons are really hot. But then if you increase the amount of air conditioning being used, that just makes the greenhouse gases more. And then and then the hot seasons are even hotter. So it just becomes it's sort of like a you know, vicious cycle. So how to manage that? There just has to be like other alternative cooling ways to just cool human beings at a very basic level to keep them alive, is to have cooling vests of some sort that can be distributed, can be worn to sleep, and maybe mattresses that are similar to the waterbeds they have in the West. I don't know if they have it in other parts of the world, but maybe not exactly the same. Something that has even more of a cooling mechanism for folks to sleep on and and so that they can actually sleep at night if there's no AC and it's over 100 degrees in the house, or in Celsius, I should talk in Celsius, over 40 degrees Celsius or something like that in the house, then there's going to be a need for mechanisms to cool down. So that's something that needs to be worked on. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see a lot of you know, I mean, there's just gonna, I mean, I just hope to see innovations on the spectrum, of just finding solutions to managing heat stress, managing just, you know, and heat related illnesses that people may succumb to in places where they're not used to it being so hot. And human beings are not really built to deal with heat, um be beyond a certain extent anyway. So it would be really useful to have mechanisms in place to help manage that. So one of the things that's sort of an emerging thing that's showing up a lot right now is some of the as francophone countries in Africa and West Africa in particular, and Central, wanting to be part of the British Commonwealth, which seems kind of odd because it almost seems well, at first hearing it almost sounds a bit like some sort of recolonization, and you want to say, oh, this is what Professor Lumumba warned about, that if they, you know, like if the African countries don't get their act together, they're going to just be recolonized again. And um in the next couple decades or so, he did allude to that. But then the reason they're giving for a lot of it is they're saying that what it is that there's a need for there's an interest, I guess, in part of a lot of these countries in sort of aligning themselves more with the English speaking world. Because if you look at Africa, if you look at the way the West African countries have the countries that have done well, that are that you can consider to have relatively prosperous economies and have fared relatively well on the economic scale, you would point to, for example, like, you know, like Ghana. You would say even Nigeria, despite its many problems, is still you know, I mean, I think it's the biggest economy, if either Nigeria in 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 Africa, in the continent still. uh a lot of that is just due to its large population. So but anyway, the point is um the point is that, you know, it seems as if the English speaking world, that's the countries in that continent, that's where it's at. And so it seems like some of the francophone countries are wanting some of the benefits of that. And so what, let me just share my screen here so you can see what I'm referring to. um so so you can see So there's a lot of that. There's more of that now in terms of them just wanting to learn English and become part of the the English speaking diaspora instead of knowing only French. And it's always occurred to me too. It's always occurred to me too that for some reason it seems as if the countries that are Anglophone, that are English speaking countries have sort of more connectivity to the rest of the world and have done better economically or whatever have you. It always seemed to me that way too. And and I always wondered what it is, what to me, part of that also kind of seemed like maybe it was just because of you know, Nigeria's a big country, and so is like you know, it's Africa, and so is like Ethiopia, and so it's like, so I just thought maybe that was part of it. But I think that the you know, some of these countries seem to think that it's also an issue of them, that the English speaking ones have seemed to fare better, and so they want that for their, I mean, that's the reason for them, for some of them, that Gabon and Togo, for example, have given for wanting to join the Commonwealth anyway. So so it'll be really interesting to see how that you know pans out, and hopefully it gets all the you know, they get what they're hoping for out of it. But it does bring me to the question of why haven't we, so to me it just seems as if what should have happened to some extent the English speaking countries like Nigeria, for example, or even Ghana, that maybe there should be more of a responsibility in helping out in going into the Francophone and learning French. I think that maybe we should have been learning French more so that we could trade and deal with our neighbors who are French speaking countries more. And their countries learning English, there's some sort of exchange of, I mean, I know they're French speakers in Nigeria and they're English speakers in Francophone countries and whatever, but um it just occurred to me that sometimes language is sort of barriers to the countries, you know, trading with each other because their official languages are different. And yeah, it would help. It would help if there was more um you know, common languages, just to see how that would facilitate the ability to trade with one another and align on issues of security and things like that, and just kind of work together. So it's interesting. Hopefully the joining of the Commonwealth makes a difference in a good way, and helps jumpstart, helps them with the initiatives that they're hoping it will. So it's interesting with Cameroon because Cameroon has both French speaking and English speaking sides, but I don't think that each side learns the other's language. Maybe they do. I don't know. They should, because then they would get the dual benefit, right? So yeah.